Right, so before we continue on, I want to make a couple of important points. We've been talking about the transition to land and that first radiation of amphibians, and then today what we're going to do is continue that discussion a little bit and then talk about the second radiation of amphibians. Now, there is one very important point that I want to make about all of this, and that concerns what happens with the circulatory system. And what happens with the circulatory system is a direct consequence, there we go. What happens with the circulatory system is a direct consequence of how these animals breathe, okay? How they're getting oxygen into the blood supply. If you go back and think about fish, their circulatory system is fundamentally different from yours. Your circulatory system has lungs, right? And you have this double circulation. So in order for blood to make one complete trip around the body, it has to go through the heart 2 times, right? Once in the systemic circulation and then once in the pulmonary circulation. So one complete trip around the body requires going through the heart twice. In fishes, one complete trip around the body requires only going through the heart 1 time. So the fish actually have a more efficient circulatory system than terrestrial vertebrates do. All right? In fact, the fish system is ideal because here you have a heart, right? And the blood inside the heart is deoxygenated, so it's oxygen poor, and it's going to be pumped to the gills where it becomes oxygenated, so it picks up oxygen in the gills. And then all this oxygen-rich blood is pumped to the systemic circulation, where it's going to be deoxygenated and pick up CO2, and then that goes through the heart, right? So there's one complete loop, and then right back to the gills. So it's this nice, extremely efficient circulatory system. And the heart in fish is pretty basic. So if you look at the heart in a fish, there's this sinus stenosis, okay, which if you've ever dissected a shark, it's just that very flimsy little sac sitting on top of the heart. The atrium, which is just a place where you're going to collect the blood. So blood pools here, comes back from the hepatic veins, pools right here, okay, dumps via gravity into the atrium. The atrium is muscular and contracts. That pumps the blood together with pressure and gravity down into the ventricle, and the ventricle then contracts and the blood goes through the conus arteriosus and then into the circulation, okay? So it's going from here to the gills. So it's a 2-chambered heart. 1 chamber, 2 chambers, all right? The sinus stenosis is just a collecting sac. It's a really flimsy thing. It's not muscular at all. The conus arteriosus is muscular. And the reason it's muscular is because every time the ventricle pumps, okay, it puts a lot of pressure on the blood, and that blood hits that major trunk right there and puts pressure on those vessel walls. So in order to prevent an aneurysm, in order to prevent that thing from blowing out, you have all this extra musculature there to sort of withstand all that pressure and even out the flow of blood. So that's the fish condition. By the time you get to amphibians, things get a little weird, because amphibians, they have the gills early in life, right, in the larval stage, but then as adults, they're also respiring through the skin and through the mouth. So now you have 2 different circulatory components where you're picking up oxygen. And the trick is, now you've oxygenated the blood coming off the skin or out of the mouth, and the question is, where are you going to dump it back in? If God had created amphibians, and God wasn't doing this as sort of a test for us or something, if God was really perfecting the amphibian body plan, what he would have done is he'd taken this vessel and dumped it right back into there. Okay? because then you would have oxygen-rich blood coming in right here like this, and then all this would be oxygen-rich up until there, okay, goes through this, and all this would be oxygen-poor. Notice what happens as a result of dumping this oxygen-rich blood in right here. The blood is now oxygen half-ass. It's only partially oxygenated because you're mixing the O2-rich blood with the O2 poor blood. So the saturation of the blood is only 50%. Why is that a problem? It's a problem because what determines the rate at which a chemical reaction happens, what determines the rate at which a cake bakes in the oven, what determines the rate, right, at which something is picked up? Well, it's going to be the temperature differential or the pressure differential, something like that. If the concentration gradient is really steep, it's going to change really quickly. Imagine imagine you're trying to run a chemical reaction, all right? And you have one solution which is 100% one concentration and something else which is sort of an intermediate concentration, and you put them together. How quickly is that differential going to be solved? What's the rate at which those two things are going to come into equilibrium versus if the differences are really great? Let's think about temperature instead. Imagine you have an ice cube right here and a blast furnace right here. Okay? What's the rate at which the ice cube is going to heat up? Very quickly. Now take something which is already hot and put it next to the blast furnace. The rate at which it's going to heat up, although it'll get there earlier, the rate at which it increases in temperature is going to be slower. Okay? It's the same thing in chemistry. You want to maximize the rate of a chemical reaction, right? You want to maximize the rate at which something is going to be infused. You need to increase the steepness of the concentration gradient. A football player runs, he takes the opening kickoff, runs it 99 yards for a touchdown. He comes running back to the bench, sits down, the team doctor comes up to him, and what does the team doctor do? Puts a mask on his face, and the mask is hooked up to a green cylinder. What's inside that green cylinder?
Oxygen.
Pure oxygen. Okay? Why is he doing that?
To help him recover faster.
He wants him to recover faster. Okay? He wants that football player to saturate his blood, and the idea is that the atmosphere is what percent oxygen?
Around 20%.
22, 23%, something like that, okay? Versus the cylinder, which is 100%. So if you're putting 23% into his system, it's going to increase at a certain rate. If you put 100%, it's going to increase at a faster rate. So his blood will saturate, theoretically, at a faster rate. Turns out not to be true for the football player. Why?
I think there's a maximum out here.
Because your circulatory system, your oxygen saturation rates are optimal at what partial pressure of oxygen? Atmospheric, 23%. So in reality, it makes no difference if it's 23%, 50%, 100%, your blood is oxygenating at the same rate, because theoretically it can't go any faster than that. Right? If you take a course in comparative physiology, you'll learn about all those oxygen dissociation curves and all of that sort of stuff. There is that maximum. So that's a consequence of natural selection and evolution. We are optimized at the concentration that we're exposed to.
So why does everybody do it then? Just
It's psychological. And the team doctor knows that, right? The team doctor knows that this guy, not all football players, some of them are really smart, but most of them are not. And this guy is going, yeah, man, yeah, coach, fire me up, man, load me up, dude. You know, sucking up on that stuff, getting ready out there and go out and kill again. You know, I mean, that's what, it's all psychological, that's what it is. But you see the problem here, now because the concentration of the oxygen is only 50%, the rate at which this is going to be oxygenated is slower. What do you know about amphibians in terms of their activity levels?
They're very lethargic, aren't they?
They're pretty lethargic, right? You ever had trouble running down a salamander?
They can be fast when they want to.
What's that?
They can be fast when they want to if they're trying to go away.
For very short distances, okay? Same thing with a frog. They can hop, and if they can get into water, great, but if they can't get into water, you just keep going after them, and they poop out.
The tiny
Okay.
ones will get you, man.
What's that?
The tiny ones will get you.
The tiny ones turn around and go, come on, man, I got you, come on. So, it seems that amphibians are in a sort of a sucky place. So there's what the fish system looks like, okay? But what amphibians do is this. So amphibians solve this problem in a very interesting sort of way. They take this septum and they form a septum which goes almost all the way through. So the left and right atria are separated. So that now when blood comes into the heart, you get all the oxygenated blood on one side and the unoxygenated blood on the other side. So they don't keep the two circulations totally separate because they're able to mix right here, okay? But at least in the atrium, they keep them separate. And notice what's happened to the size of the sinus stenosis. The sinus stenosis is now smaller, which is sort of interesting. Where does the heartbeat begin? Where does the heartbeat begin? In your heart, where does it begin? Does it begin right smack dab in the middle when your heart contracts? Do both atria contract simultaneously? No, it's asymmetric. It starts on one side and then goes to the other side. So when the heart is depolarized, where is it depolarized? Is it depolarized on the pulmonary circuit or is it depolarized on the systemic circuit? It's depolarized on the systemic circuit. So it's depolarized right there. That place right there becomes, in you, what's referred to as the SA node, the sinoatrial node. So that's where the heartbeat originates, and that has an important consequence. What happens is, because the depolarization wave starts here, this atrium contracts first. So this blood squirts out like that before this blood does. So the blood is coming through in pulses, first this, and then that. And they're coming into the ventricle, and the ventricle is totally open. So you're thinking to yourself, man, that's sucky, because now you've kept it separate up there, and now everything's going to get all mixed up. But notice what else they do. They put a septum here between the, right down the middle of the conus arteriosus, and it has this corkscrew shape. What the heck is that all about? It turns out that blood, okay, blood is thick, right? It has relative low viscosity. Whoops, high viscosity, right? So it's relatively thick. And what that means is it also goes through the heart. It doesn't achieve laminar flow. What is laminar flow? Think about the Olympics. Think about Olympic swimming. Why have the Americans dominated Olympic swimming over the last couple of Olympics? We do something that the other teams don't. Not me. I just watch. I don't do jack. Okay? But the people that are responsible for the team, they do something that the other teams don't. What is it that they do? Back in the days when we did cool stuff, okay? What did we do?
Steroids.
Yeah, no, that's breaking the rules. You can't do that. Ask, what's that cyclist's name?
Lance Armstrong?
Pardon?
Is it Lance Armstrong?
Lance Armstrong. Yeah, ask him about all that stuff. No steroids. Their swimsuits are different. Okay? Their swimsuits are designed so that as water is going across the top of the swimsuit, right, it becomes turbulent like that. And what that turbulence does is it increases drag. So there's resistance to flow. And what the swimsuits are designed to do is dimple. So the swimsuit forms those little dimples like that, so when the water going over starts to do one of those things, these dimples change, and the result is that when the water flows over the swimsuit, it achieves near perfect laminar flow. How did they come up with that idea? They looked at the skin on dolphins, and they very carefully videotaped what happened to the surface of the skin in dolphins when dolphins were going through the water really fast. What happens? Their skin gets all dimpled and they achieve laminar flow. So these swimsuits, they went to all these high-tech companies and asked, how can we get laminar flow on a swimsuit? They said, oh, well, let's do this, 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 and this. And the Americans are wearing swimsuits that enable them to achieve laminar flow, which reduces the drag, which means they can now swim that 400 meters in like a thousandth of a second faster than anybody else. And during the last Olympics, all the other people figured out what the hell was going on, so now they've banned those sorts of swimsuits. So we're fucked. Now we're going to lose. Okay, better living through technology or something. We had it going for a while, but somebody looked a little different. So in other words, you do not get laminar flow going through the heart. You get turbulent flow. And what that means now is because the blood is turbulent going through here, it tends not to mix. So you have these two turbulent layers going through roughly at the same time but slightly pulsed. And because of the turbulence, they're not intermixing. So the two circulations, even though it's open here, they stay pretty much separate. That wouldn't happen if flow was laminar. And here it comes down here, and it turns out that this dividing line and that corkscrew keeps everything separate. So the amphibians have solved that problem, that mixing problem, by relying on turbulence and separation in the conus arteriosus. So now, let's go to the next evolutionary stage, which are the reptiles. What the reptiles do is they take that septum that's in the atrium and they extend it into the ventricle, but not completely, except in two groups. Okay? In crocodilians and in varanid lizards, the septum that goes through the ventricle is complete. But they maintain this opening right here, which is called the foramen of Panizza. So what happens then, if we look at that, so see how we now have two circulations right here, and we get potential mixing in the heart? Okay? What do you know about reptiles compared to mammals? Let's think of a really fast lizard, like a race runner, right? There used to be a population of race runners right over there by the power plant. I think they're all gone now when they did the remodeling thing. But they used to, you could get one of those race runners out on the sidewalk and he would run really fast for a little while and then he would stop, okay? Because he goes into lactic acid debt, and he's in anaerobic respiration, and you've got him. Okay? That's because of that. Let's look at what the heart looks like. There's what the heart in a reptile looks like. And notice what happens to the sinus venosus. It's just, now it's just this little bulgy thing right there. In mammals, that becomes the SA node, okay, where the heartbeat originates. Now the separation between the two atria is complete. The separation between the two ventricles is almost complete. Why don't they just extend it all the way? Like crocodilians and varanids. What are the varanid lizards? Those are things like the Komodo dragon. Those gigantic lizards that eat tourists, you know, on the island of Komodo. Peasants and tourists, primary food source. And deer and sheep, cattle, things of that sort. They're big. Komodo dragons are awesome. And they're venomous too. So they don't attack you and tear you down. They just bite you, and then they back off. They bite your ankle, and then they back off. And you go, hurry, you run down the trail to get to a hospital. And then you go into anaphylactic shock, and then you fall down in the trail. And the Komodo dragon will follow your temperature signature for more than a mile until he finally finds you, and then he gobbles you up.
Doesn't the crocodilian do it so that way it can shunt the blood to special systems depending on what it's doing?
Yes. And so the foramina panizza is there in crocodilians so that they can shunt blood because they've closed this up. All the other reptiles keep that open so that they can shunt blood from the pulmonary circuit to the systemic circulation. Why would they do that? The pulmonary circulation is the core. The systemic circulation is out at the periphery. So what they're doing is they're giving themselves the ability to shunt blood from the core to the surface or from the surface to the core by changing the thoracic pressure. Why would you want to do that? Well, it's first thing in the morning. You're sticking your head out of your burrow. You're letting the sun heat up your head. You shunt that blood from your head to the core of the body, heat up the brain, heat up the heart, heat up all the internal organs, and once all those systems are warmed up, you can then warm up the rest of the body and you're ready for action. So it's a thermoregulatory strategy. When a baby is born, a human baby is born, what's the first thing the midwife or the doctor or the nurse does? What was your first real, I mean, I'm sure you don't remember it, but what's the first real introduction to life you had? Unless you were born unless you were a preemie. Was anybody here a preemie? Everybody here was full term when they were born? Okay. Ever known a baby that was a preemie? Yeah. So if you're not a preemie, what's your first introduction to the reality of life? They grab you by the ankles, hold you upside down, and whack your ass, right? Why do they do that? Welcome to life, sucker. It only goes downhill from here. The easy times are over. Okay, I'm gonna slap your ass. Welcome to life. Why do they do that? Just for grins and giggles? Doesn't it seem sort of like child abuse to you? Just prepping you for the way your dad's going to treat you. Okay. What are they doing? They're trying to get the kid to go like that. Okay? They're trying to shock this infant into suddenly increasing pressure in the thoracic cavity. And the reason they do that is because in mammals, there's a little valve right there. So that is open during pregnancy. Why is it open during pregnancy? Because the lungs don't function. Right? You can't use your lungs when you're in utero because you're in this amniotic sac filled with amniotic fluid. You breathe that stuff, you're going to drown. Okay? So that means all the oxygen, and your lungs need oxygen too, so all the oxygen your lungs are going to get is coming through this gap right here. So that valve stays open in mammals in development, right, until birth. And in birth, they slap your ass, you take that big breath, that valve slams shut, and now you're good to go. In those cases where the valve doesn't slam shut, it's called a blue baby. And then they have to take the baby to surgery to close that valve. Okay? That's why they take Apgar scores. Does anybody here know what an Apgar score is? When a baby is born, they have this little checklist they complete. Does the baby vocalize? Does the baby have pink fingers? Does the baby have blue fingers, blue toes, pink toes? You know, all those. It's the score from 1 to 10 or something like that, and then they take it right away at birth, and then they take it a few minutes later, right? And it should improve, and if your Apgar score is 7 or above, you're good. If it's not, then they need to watch you, and if it's low, then they need to take you to surgery and close that little valve, okay? In mammals, what happens is that foramen and panizza is closed. And the heart now is totally divided. So you have 2 separate circulations, okay? There's a pulmonary circulation and the systemic circulation. But in order to make one complete trip through the body, you have to go through the heart twice. So but we have complete separation of O2 rich and O2 poor blood, just like the fish, although we have half the efficiency because you have to go through the heart twice. Okay? And if you look at the mammalian heart, there's what it looks like. Now, right in there is going to be the SA node. That's where the heartbeat is initiated, complete separation. Everything is nicely subdivided and all that. We get a complete separation of O2 rich and O2 poor blood. Okay? So that's an important concept to keep in mind while we're thinking about the evolution of the amphibians. So let's go back now and look at, pick up where we left off. When we're talking about the evolution of amphibians, we were talking about the auditory pathways. That's important, right? Because the amphibians have this opercularis muscle, which goes from the pectoral girdle to, right, to that middle ear. Okay? It's making that connection. In you, that's gone. In reptiles and in mammals, there is no opercularis muscle. So in reptiles, mammals, birds, the sound waves are airborne, right? And amphibians get that part of it, but amphibians also get ground-borne sound waves, which go through that amphibian papilla right there. So they have 2 avenues of sound detection, low frequency and high frequency sounds. What's different about the pectoral girdle in a frog compared to you or a reptile? What does how does a bullfrog or a toad, what's the posture of a toad or a bullfrog? They're sitting there, their butts parked on the ground, their legs are cocked, ready to jump. What are their front legs doing?
They're holding them up, right?
They're holding them up. But how are they holding themselves up? Like this? Like this? Or like this? Like this. Okay? We've talked about this already. Reptilian push-ups versus reptilian planks versus mammal planks. Have we done that little exercise? We didn't talk about it at all? Tonight, your homework assignment is this. I'm not going to ask you for your data, okay? This is just for your own personal enrichment, okay? And I want you to go home, and I want you to do 2 sets of planks. Give yourself a break between the 2 sets of planks. The first plank I want you to do is the Reptilian Plank. So I want you to get on the ground, keep your belly, right, and your waist and everything off the ground, keep your back straight, okay? And then I want you to put your hands out like this and hold yourself up like that. And then just time yourself. How many seconds can you hold that posture? All right? How many seconds do you think you can hold it?
30 seconds.
30 seconds?
Like 2 seconds.
I'm thinking closer to not very many. Okay, I would be surprised if you could do it for 30 seconds. A bodybuilder can probably do it for a minute, maybe. Okay? Now, take a break. Your chest is going to be burning. You're going to be breathing hard. You're going to be sweating. You're going to go get yourself a beer. Okay, relax, kick back. You know, so an hour later, half an hour later, do it again. Only this time, do a mammal plank. And now put your arms directly under like this, and just hold your body up like that. Okay? How long can you do it? A heck of a lot longer. So why don't reptiles do that? Why are they doing that? It's because of the evolution of limbs and because of the way those girdles are established. Now when a reptile does it, it is fundamentally different because the girdle is different in a reptile than it is in you. In a reptile, the girdle is like this big box which goes around the chest. And it's even a more extensive box on the chest of the frog. So on the frog, it's this big, heavy, it's got these struts down below, these struts up the side, these struts across the back. Everything is designed so that frog can do that and do that all day long. It has all sorts of mechanical advantage, all sorts of heavy architecture up here that makes that possible. On you, all that's gone. You don't have the supracoracoid, you don't have the supraspinatus, you don't have all that stuff. All you've got left is this little wimpy-ass scapula, and in some mammals, a clavicle. That's all. Why is it? Well, because by just having the clavicle, that gives you a lot more mobility up here than a lizard or a frog would have. Okay? So, the amphibian takes advantage of all that heavy architecture and runs that muscle from that big bulky girdle right up to the middle ear, and is therefore able to hear ground-borne sound waves. And that's a good thing. What that means is the amphibian, who cannot turn his neck, who cannot look over his shoulder, right, who can look up, can look down, but can't look over his shoulder, he can hear you coming, he can hear the snake coming, he can hear the predator coming by the vibrations through the ground. And can go, holy shit, time to jump. Get the heck out of here. Okay? All right. Vision in amphibians, modern amphibians at least, is different than it is in mammals, right? Salamanders and frogs have green rods in the retina. It's not exactly clear what those green rods are all about. Those are absent in caecilians, which are these fossorial amphibians, which basically have reduced eyes anyway, right? Think about your visual perception. What kinds of rods and cones? You have both rods and cones in your eyes, right? What are the rods for? What are the cones for? Think. How many people have a cat? How many people have a dog? How many people have both?
I have both.
You have a cat and a dog. Ever take pictures of your cat using a flash?
All of them.
And what, do you get red eye on your cat?
It's like green.
Yeah, it's different. It's not red. It's a different color, right?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Stratum lucidum.
Yeah, what is it about the distribution of rods and cones in the cat? When are cats active?
Mostly
Night. So they're nocturnal. How much color information is available at night?
not much.
Little, if any. So what the cat is doing, the cat has predominantly rods, And those rods enable it to see black and white, movement, light, dark, shape. Okay? The dog, on the other hand, is primarily diurnal, and the dog has color vision. All right? So cats have nocturnal vision, dogs, black and white, dogs have color vision. Bats, mice, bunny rabbits, they all have rods and very few cones. So cones give you color vision, rods give you shape, movement, black, white, that sort of stuff. So now, in these guys, you have green rods. What the heck is that all about? We don't know. We don't understand whether fish have color vision. We don't understand whether amphibians have color vision. We had a graduate student here years ago that was working on the evolution of color vision in fishes, and unfortunately she changed projects. I mean, she had finished the degree, she had some evidence that there was, or she finished the thesis, there was some evidence that there was color vision in fishes, right? And then she had to abandon the project because of her major professor, and she switched to a different project, okay? All right. In addition to that, amphibians have skin glands. Let's just look at a phylogeny of the vertebrates that we understand to this point. So here is our basal clade, right? And these are the fishes. What do you know about the skin on fishes?
Scaly.
Scaly, but what else? How many people do catch and release when you go fishing? So what are you supposed to do before you bring that sucker in? I'm assuming you're not going for mudsuckers, but bring them in. What are you supposed to do before you grab them and take the hook off? Oops. Oops, you don't, oh, you're fucking up. Oh, I can tell. You're breaking the rules, you're murdering fish. Might as well just keep it, eat it. What are you supposed to do?
Take the hook out.
Pardon?
Take the hook out.
Do what?
Take the hook out.
Before you take the hook out, before you grab the foot, before you pull it out of the net, or before you grab it off the end of your line.
You're supposed to get your hands wet.
Supposed to get your hands wet. Okay? That's so that when you have wet hands and you grab that fish, you won't remove the mucus layer on the surface of the fish. The mucus layer is there to prevent the fish from getting infections. Okay? So it's this nice slimy layer on the surface of the fish, and if you grab it with dry hands, you're going to remove that slimy layer, release the fish, and that fish is now open to infection. That slimy layer comes from skin glands, sebaceous glands. So fish have skin glands. Amphibians have skin glands as well. So skin glands show up here, and they're here in the frogs, the salamanders, and the caecilians. Okay? So everybody here has skin glands. How's about mammals? Do mammals have skin glands? Yeah, they're your sweat glands. Okay? You have lots of sebaceous glands, sweat glands. Those are the things that gave you acne when you were in junior high or high school. Those are the things that enable you to nurse. Mammary glands are nothing more than modified sweat glands. Okay? How's about reptiles? Do reptiles have skin glands? They don't. That's an adaptation to being out of water. Because suddenly the loss of those skin glands means they don't have to be intimately tied to water. So the loss of sebaceous glands occurs right there on this phylogeny. Do birds have sebaceous glands? Do birds have sweat glands? No. Do they have oil glands on their skin? No. Except they do. They have one. Where is the one remaining sebaceous gland on a bird? How do birds preen themselves? What do they do?
They use their beaks.
Where do they put their beak?
down by the base of the feathers.
Yeah, they take that beak and they rub it right at the base of the tail feathers where the uropterygial gland is. They get all the oil on that beak and then they're rubbing that oil across their feathers. That's the same gland that when on Thanksgiving, everybody's going to be around your table. Mom will have made some 40-pound turkey. It's sitting there. Uncle Ralph is, everybody's there around your table. Everybody's feasting themselves. Everybody is stuffed. Everyone's bloated. Everyone has opened up their belt, loosened their belt, so they can breathe, okay? You're absolutely drunk. You're absolutely stuffed. This carcass of a turkey is in the middle of the table, and Uncle Ralph isn't done yet. And the only part of that turkey that hasn't been cut is that golden brown heart-shaped thing right at the back end. And he reaches over with his fork and he stabs it and he slices it off and he sticks it in his mouth. He takes one bite and then he begins to puke. Okay? That's the uropterygial gland. It's slimy, it's oily, it's nasty, it's disgusting, and Uncle Ralph just got it. Okay? All right, so that's the skin glands. There are a few more things here we want to talk about on this phylogeny, but that's where we'll stop today, okay? All right, see you guys on Thursday. Oh, I remember the other thing we're working on, and that is the locomotion stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So did I ask for anything from you yet?
No.
Still has to read over the handout you gave us.
Okay, good. So we can talk about that on Thursday. Good. Awesome. All right, see you guys on Thursday.
Well, we have will the test be over lecture or just?
Yeah, no, the exam is